Welcome to Record-ology.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Record-ology. I am so excited you're there. So today is going to be a very interesting show, at least for me, so hopefully it is for you as well. Today we're going to be talking about a little bit of history and some examples of Bluebird Records. Perhaps you've heard of Bluebird Records. Bluebird was RCA Victor's budget label and started around 1932, 1933. There was a gentleman by the name of Eli Oberstein at RCA Victor, who sort of had this brainchild to start this record label, this sub-label that specialized in jazz and blues and offered the records 3 for $1, 33 cents. It was very much a bargain situation for the time and a novelty in that regard that you could get these records for a third the price, and they had up-and-coming artists on them. It was sort of the SoundCloud of its time. Now, you guys know what a big Glen Miller fan I am. I was very much blessed recently with the gift of this record. This is a Bluebird of Glen Miller's. Glen Miller started off on the Bluebird label, and because it was jazz and blues, and eventually, in the late 30s, this is where RCA was putting a lot of its big band music. And it was a thrift label. Glen Miller really liked the fact that the kids could buy his records and, for a good price. And he would still, make a decent profit, but it wouldn't break the bank for the kids. And Glen Miller stayed on this label for some time. And we'll talk about kind of what happened thereafter. Now, if you want to dig into the weeds on Bluebird, there was some trials they did with Woolworths, and there was these 8-inch records and all kinds of cool stuff, getting it started. But just know that Bluebird was the jazz and blues subsidiary value budget label of RCA Victor. As you can see, there's Nipper at the top there, his master's voice. There was nothing to detract from the fact that this was indeed a RCA Victor record. Now, they do mention that these were, pressed as cheaply as possible, but as far as I can tell, the Bluebird records, from a physical quality standpoint, are just as good as the Victor, the RCA Victors, which we'll look at in a minute. So I wanted to play a little bit, because I always want to have some music to play. So we're going to listen to Glen Miller's very first Bluebird record. Now, for those of you that are Glen Miller fans, as am I, you will know that the band we know as the Glen Miller Orchestra is the second band that he had after being very prolific in starting other big bands and contributing to other big bands as a session player, as an arranger, as a manager, and all kinds of, pretty much every big band and name band you've ever heard of, he was involved in some form or fashion behind the scenes or as a player in that band. But he said in 1937, I'm going to start my own band. And he did, and that band didn't do so good. That's called the band that failed. The band that made it is his second band, the one that signed to Bluebird, and then, has all the top 10 hits, In the Mood, Pennsylvania 65000, all that stuff. So there are actually some records, super rare for Glen Miller. I don't have anything of this caliber. For Glen Miller fans on Columbia, on Brunswick, from his old band. And actually, I believe his second band cut a couple sides on those labels before he switched to Bluebird. If you hear a cheep in the background, I don't know, the Yoshi the Bird, it's late too. It's like 11 o'clock at night. He's just awake and he's making sounds, so you'll have to forgive me. So here is Glen Miller's first, not only the first release of the record, because the release sometimes doesn't necessarily coincide with, the recording, but this was recorded first and released first for Glen Miller. So here we go, My Reverie, 1938. And the fidelity is amazing. This is in really good condition. In my reverie. So I have to be careful what I play, obviously copyright, blah, 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 blah. Now, I want to show you something that I think is really, really cool on these records. You'll notice the run-out groove. I'm going to zoom in a little bit there so you can see a little bit better. You'll see that kind of lopsided run-out groove. Why is that? Think about what could possibly benefit from that situation while I show you what happens. So when the needle reaches the end of the record, and obviously, these were designed to be played with orthophonic phonographs. They were electrically recorded. That oblique, is that the term? Anyway, that kind of wobbly, weird run-out groove is designed to trigger an auto return mechanism on early automatic return record players, which is pretty wild, to think that they had that technology back then. So let's go ahead and slow this one down. So what happened with Glen Miller in particular, as RCA Victor, saw that, Glen was becoming super popular. I mean, not just popular for a big band and popular for the Bluebird label, but was becoming like the number one band in the land, as they were known. He was like the big band music was pop music back in the late 30s and early 40s. So he was number one. This was what the kids wanted. This is what they were dancing to. So they eventually moved him to their premium label, Victor. These are the RCA Victor label. This is their premium label. And we're going to show a couple of variants here in a second. But so he was eventually moved to this in 1942, shortly before he disbanded his orchestra in September of 1942 to join the war effort, where he produced some of the best sonically recorded records of all time. Beautiful recordings. If you like Glen Miller and you want to hear something you haven't heard before, just start by looking on YouTube for Glen Miller Army stuff. The fidelity is amazing. The Army used some amazing recording techniques. Then you got V-discs and all kinds of stuff. I want to show you another variant of the Bluebird label. This is my favorite. This is the ultimate Bluebird label. This is another variant here. Actually, is that any different? When I was preparing for this show, I was like, yeah, that's a different version. I don't think that is. The blue's a little darker, but I think this is literally the same label. Okay, never mind what I said. There's another iteration. By the way, there's In the Mood, the original. You can see this record is a lot more worn out than that. Now, there are variants to the Bluebird label. I just didn't do a good job of pulling some aside. So after World War II, RCA Victor phased out Bluebird, and decades since World War II, they've kind of brought it in and out, mostly as a reissue thing. In the 50s, before they did RCA Camden value label, they brought back Bluebird again. But yeah, that's pretty. World War II was the end of the original Bluebird label. So yeah, Victor was the main label. And so if you find Glen Miller on Victor labels, those are good, original for the most part. If you find them like this, where it says RCA Victor, this is, most of the time, these are transcriptions, meaning that they are dubs released after Glen's passing. So this is after World War II. Now, this particular one is an anomaly because somebody a while ago was looking at the matrix on this and the matrix number, and they're like, wait a minute. Did a little research. And even though this is from a release, you can see it's a Swing Classics release. It's like an album of four big band artists. This particular pressing of String of Pearls is special because it's an original pressing from the original matrix, meaning that these grooves were in, contact with metal parts, stampers, matrices, etc., that were in original contact with the wax in the studio the day the band recorded that. It was not dubbed from another recording. So that's special. Finally, I wanted to show you modern iteration, modern-ish, I'm talking 1970s, iteration of the Bluebird label. So when RCA Victor was releasing, you can see the 70s RCA logo there. When RCA Victor was re-releasing some big band material in the 70s, they went back to this Bluebird label, kind of a motif, as it were. I don't know if there was any original Bluebird labels that looked like this. Maybe there was. There probably was. Now that I think about it, I think there was. But beautiful nonetheless. I just love it. When I see Bluebird RCA, to me that's really special because I know that was Glen's label. To me that's Glen's label. And the backside of these records, this one has a gigantic version of that label. This is from the complete Glen Miller. Most of these records that you're seeing here today were gifts. So again, thank you so very much to those of you that were kind enough to donate to the cause here. I really appreciate it. Very humbled. I remember trying to hunt down my first Glen Miller record, an actual original, and it was tough. I mean, they're out there on like eBay, but that's expensive. Coming across this stuff in the wild for me just didn't happen. I found LPs from time to time, but Glen Miller 78s don't just show up. I found maybe 2 of them. No, that's not true. Originally I found a couple, and then a couple years later I started stumbling across them in like antique stores and stuff. But it was slow to find. So I cherish these, and I am very appreciative to those who have donated. So, but anyway, I hope you thought this is an interesting little video here about the Bluebird label. A very interesting footnote. A lot of big bands were represented on this label, and RCA was able to reissue that material. Speaking of which, the original metal parts for these records, most of it exists in some form or fashion. They are highly deteriorated, and I geek out on this kind of stuff, but they're actually kept in an Iron Mountain vault by the Iron Mountain Company in Iron Mountain, Pennsylvania, in an old abandoned what's the word? Mine. An iron mine. An abandoned iron mine. And they keep a lot of Hollywood movies out there, document storage. It's the same company. If you work in corporate, you know Iron Mountain. Usually they're the document shredding people. But yeah, they have possession of a lot of the UMG and Sony material out there, including a lot of the Glen Miller metal parts for the studio recording. So they are sitting on metal shelves and plastic bins, and even when the re-release I was showing you a minute ago on LP was made in the 70s, and they went to make the tape dubs of those metal parts, they were highly deteriorated to the point where they had to reach out and find some commercial pressings in order to complete the complete set, in order to re-release that in 91 or in the 70s for the records, and then in 91 for the CDs. So, all right, a little bit down the rabbit trail. Hope you thought this was interesting, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Happy record hunting. We will see you tomorrow.